Well, hello, Tom. It's been a hot minute since we last talked.
Yeah, what's going on?
Well, just another day in paradise. Got some crazy projects going on, so staying out of trouble and keeping busy, which is good.
Cool.
So let's dive in. Talk to me. I mean, there were some things that you were going to check into when we last talked, and I don't know how far you've gotten with the work that we were exploring.
Yeah. Well, I built a second grow room with horizontal beds. The room was built. I'd been running it for almost 5 years in pots. So I made the switch, learned from some mistakes from the other room I have with the horizontal beds, and yeah, I think I really nailed it. I did my first full grow completed. I would say the official yield isn't in yet, but I'm pretty convinced it's a record breaking yield with a cultivar that doesn't even usually yield that much. So pretty mind blowing. Um, and yeah, I was thinking we could start by the lessons I've learned from my last room, what I did different, and I'm actually fixing my mistakes in my first room right now too. So maybe I can start with that.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big project I've been working on. I actually sent Ken a picture. Ken, do you have that leaf picture? Um, that's sort of going to illustrate the problem that I've been having with some cultivars. Do you see those spots there?
Yep.
So that appears about 3 weeks in flower, and I'm gonna say like on 60% of cultivars would do that. Maybe 40% wouldn't show it, 60% would show. So it's not a big issue, but it does progress through flower and get worse and worse. And later in flower, there starts to have some yellow discolorations, and it's really on the big fan leaves. So matter of fact, on day 21, a lot of growers remove all their fan leaves. And if you would do that, you would sort of remove the problem and you wouldn't even see it because the leaves that stick out of the buds don't show that. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah, like some cultivars, I usually don't do a full de-leaf on day 21, but some cultivars actually really benefit off of it. I have one cultivar that I'll fully strip on day 21, even the top two fan leaves. Some guys just leave that. I'll take that off too. And 3 weeks later, you could never tell I've done anything because it grows such big fat leaves out of the buds that if you don't do a full strip, you get a lot of larvae stuff, a lot of stuff doesn't get light, etc. So that's a really particular cultivar that I use that technique. But most cultivars, I don't do that. And that sort of deficiency on the big fan leaves gets worse. And I wanted to try to fix it, basically. It doesn't appear to really affect the buds. It doesn't really affect the yield. Nothing like that. And the other thing about that I wanted to mention about this weird deficiency that I'm getting is usually when I see a deficient plant, I see things like redness in the stems, the petioles getting really red. The stems are kind of stiffer. And I would say that's just like an overall deficient plant. It's hard for me to really point to say it's a calcium deficiency or a potassium deficiency. It's just overall kind of a deficient plant. It would easily happen if you have a plant in a pot and the plant's way too big for the pot. going pot bound, you see all these deficiencies that I'm talking about. So for this deficiency that I've been having in the horizontal beds, my stems are perfectly lush green. They're not stiff, brittle. They stay sort of flexible. It's like there's no problem except what you saw getting a little worse. So I tried a couple of things to fix it. So since I'm really used to growing in potting mixes like super soil, I really don't think is the O Horizon the problem. So I really sort of blamed it on a problem that there would be in the A Horizon.
Okay.
And that being said, when I build my A Horizon, I really didn't take the pH in consideration. That was one big thing. And depending on the test, I did 2 tests with Logan Labs, and one came at 5.2 and the other came at 5.6 pH. So that's pretty acidic for cannabis, I would say. Would you say?
Agreed.
Yeah. And when we met up at that conference in Edmonton about, I don't know, a year and a half ago, I showed you the soil that I used. And one of the first things that you said was you thought that the sand in it didn't really look coarse. It looked a little too fine for you. So that was one of your observations. So anyway, I started thinking, what can I do to try to fix the pH in that A Horizon? And I tried a bunch of things and basically failed. So
you learn.
Yeah. So my beds are on trays, like the same trays that guys that do rock wool would have a bunch of blocks on, like those gray trays that do your whole table. So I flooded my my beds a bunch with TM7, that humic acid. Yep. I thought, hey, maybe if it's a micronutrient deficiency, it's going to give it the micronutrients it has. We know that humic acids can neutralize pH. So I thought maybe that could have an effect on the problem too. So the humic acids product, whether I fed it from the top or from the bottom, it didn't do anything to address the problem. Then another thing interesting that I tried, I've been working on my compost for about a year, composting everything from my facility, and I hadn't used the compost yet. I don't really know why. Long story short, everything I do, I really want to make sure I'm doing it right. So I go low and slow. So I performed a bunch of lab tests on the compost. I tried using the compost in potted plants and flowered them first, et cetera, et cetera. And when I really got convinced that it wasn't going to do anything wrong to my plants, I top dressed my beds with it to see if those humic acids could maybe seep down the bed and fix the problem. And it didn't. So I still had that issue. One thing that I observed, though, that I thought was really interesting is that I didn't really top dress anything on that grow except for the compost. And I think I went a little heavy. So on a, let's say I take like a 4x4 from the bed, I put about 5 gallons of compost top dress. So it gave it maybe like 3/4 of an inch. I'm just guessing, something like that, of compost. Would you say that's a pretty heavy application?
3/4 of an inch is cool. You know, heavy to me would be more like 2 inches.
Okay.
Well, you know, typically it's anywhere from a 1/4 inch to an inch would be considered a good top dress. So I think
nice. Okay, so about something like that. So anyway, after the whole grow, which still went really good. Matter of fact, that particular grow was my highest yielding grow ever. Right, so it wasn't a fail at all. But my plants showed that deficiency again, and I tested the soil after that grow, and I think I started around, I'm gonna say, when you look at the saturated paste test, they give you uh, what is it? They give you ppms for soluble salts,
Yep.
and it gives you an idea. Correct me if I'm wrong, of how amended you are. Um, right? So let's say you have 400 ppms. Well, you need to add amendments. It's not amended heavy enough. But if you're at 1500, you're kind of too much. Would you say that makes sense? Analyzing it like that?
So when you're talking biological versus ppm, which is a measurement of your soluble salts,
Yeah.
The interesting thing I've noticed in the past 6 months is that the sweet spot is between 800 and 1200. That's when I'm getting tremendous flagellate or amoeba production. So I think that, that if you look at it like, all right, what did you come in at?
I had something reasonable around 1,000.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you had 1,000. So you're definitely not affecting the biology. Um, and to be honest with you, there's still so many things that we don't completely understand about, like the ppm as far as like ions are concerned.
Yeah.
What is it, right? So yeah, it's measuring a form of conductivity, right? So, but there are so many like natural occurring elements that are or can be in an ionic form that can affect that. And before we go too deep into this, did by any chance did you use any calcium in your building of the horizontal bed to adjust for or take into consideration the lower pH?
No, I didn't do anything. That was a big mistake when I built that A Horizon. I did not take pH into consideration at all.
Okay.
I think the reason why, I'll tell you honestly, is because before growing in beds, I was like a lot of organic growers growing in pots, mixing their own super soil. And the way that I did it, I used Pro Mix, HP, mixed amendments in it, mixed worm castings, and the Pro Mix HP. I think that they neutralize the pH.
Yep.
So I think that without knowing it, I was always on target my whole life with pH. So I didn't really realize how important it was. You know what I'm saying? So it's the first time that I run into this issue of having acidic pH. It just wasn't on my mind. But yeah, go on with the ppms. It was interesting there.
Yeah. So like this definitely like kind of pushes the envelope of what we understand, um, especially in biochemistry, right? Geochemistry is easy. That we know pretty much everything there is to know about that. But as soon as you start to take into consideration the ionic value of the biology, now you're in a realm that we are just kindergartens, if that, as far as our true understanding of. Because remember, like it goes back to electrons. Everything always goes back to electrons or protons.
Yeah.
And that is that they can be shared or they can be stolen or they can be donated. And that's where that really fine line of understanding what's available and what's bound up becomes unclear because of the interface of the biology. So like if you took something that was super biologically active and at 1,000 ppms, if you killed everything, right? If you steamed it so that you literally neutralized everything, would the ppm go up? Well, in theory, it would, because now those ions are measurable because they're outside of the protective shell in the bacteria.
Right.
And so again, and then you start to consider like nutrient cycling. Well, how is nutrient cycling affecting the ppm? Well, if you have a tremendous amount of flagellates and they're eating a tremendous, or grazing on a tremendous amount of bacteria all throughout the course of the day, well, those nutrients are being released and they are going to be measurable.
Yeah.
And so, it gets to a point, like I was having a conversation with a physicist literally yesterday on this, and he's like, well, we need measurable statistics. And I'm like, all right, dude, you're dealing with nature. How are you going to associate numbers to things that are so variable?
Yeah.
And, we went down the rabbit hole for almost an hour when I was trying to explain to him. I'm like, look, we take a microscope and we take 1 gram of soil, put it into a vial, add water, liquid to it until it becomes 10 milligrams. And we shake it up, and then we take 1 drop out of that entire vial.
That's how they do the saturated paste test?
Well, the saturated paste is different. Saturated paste is available nutrients. So they're using a weak acid to basically extract whatever is going to be available. And so
your procedure is that for the soluble salts?
Well, for microscopy, like trying to understand this relationship between what we're seeing under the microscope versus what's actually happening in nature, i.e. the availability of nutrients, right?
Yeah.
Again, back to soluble salts, ionization. What is an available ion that's floating around in my soil solution or in my liquid or whatever?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to explain to him that the variables are too great. We don't have the technology yet to really unleash the fact that, well, for instance, we know if we have 200 200,000 protozoa per unit gram of soil, we are releasing 300 plus pounds of nitrogen per acre over a 90-day period. Well, that's great, right? That's a valuable metric that we can use to associate nitrogen, a very important ion, available against biology, against predators, specifically predators. But when it comes to like the overall pool of available ions, that's not telling you jack shit, right? It's basically a one-off. It's nitrogen. Well, what about the other ones? What about calcium, magnesium, potassium, and the other important components that make up that ppm, that available nutrients? And that's the problem, is that we just don't have the ability to manage that or measure that information at this point in time.
Yeah.
So back to your question is, well, like if you're at 1,000, then you're at a good spot biologically for the biology to be doing the nutrient cycling for you.
Yeah.
Where are they pulling that from? Well, we're assuming most of that's being pulled from the sand, silt, clay, and organic matter. But then you've also added some amendments in too, which are either playing in a geochemistry realm or part of the biogeochemistry realm. And that's where it just gets super complicated super quick. So when you are in that 1,000 sweet spot, when you're in 1,000 range, you're not seeing any redness in any of the stems or plants, correct?
No.
Right. Okay, so that's good. Now, when you are starting to see those reds, where is your ppm at that point?
To be honest with you, I never see red stems or anything like that in the beds. Whenever I would see problems with red stems, would be more in pots.
Did you ever measure the ppm when you were in the pots?
Yeah, and to be honest, like full on commercial grows, I've always been pretty fortunate to be on target. When I would see major problems would be mostly in my bedroom. Like, let's say I would have mother plants in pots that have been in that pot for way too long. I start seeing that. Sometimes I have backup genetics that have been in pots for way too long. They start showing that. Don't get me wrong. I've had a couple of grows that I've could have done better for sure. And that I've seen a bit of red stem and stuff like that when I used to grow in pots. I would say for the most part, again, it has to do with plants that were too big for the pot. And the other thing, when I was going in potted plants, I wasn't soil testing as much. I kind of had my recipe and it worked for me. And I wasn't as advanced as I feel I am right now, as far as lab testing.
So when you see the red stems and you realize that, okay, obviously this plant has sucked the vast majority of the nutrient or available nutrients out of the existing soil matrix. Did you amend? Did you fertilize at that point, or you just said, "Oh fuck, I got to up pot," or "Oh shit, I gotta"?
So for me, let's say this would happen. My room that used to be in pots, I used to count how many main branches I had per plant. And that really gave me an idea of how sort of big the plant was for the pot. And I had it down to how many main branches that plant could take for that size of pot. Okay.
And by main branches, you're talking clones.
No, the way that I have a particular way of managing my canopy where I top my clone and I shoot for a certain amount of of main branches, and I have 6-inch by 6-inch trellis squares, and I sort of fit one branch per square of trellis.
Okay.
And when I flip the flower, I like to prune off all the nodes from that main branch in that square of trellis and only leave the top node. And I flip the flower that way. It sounds crazy, but if you really want to fill a canopy, indoor cannabis, I think it's the absolute best way.
I agree.
It actually takes a whole lot of labor to do this, because to be able to prune a plant well enough to fit every trellis square and have it all equal, like no branches taller or shorter, etc., to train it all even, it's a ton of labor. And I'm actually considering right now different strategies or techniques of trellising. Just quickly, for an example, I see growers not top their plants, flip the flower a lot earlier than I would. So instead of a 3-week veg, let's say, they have a 1-week veg. They don't remove nodes and they sort of let it go like a Christmas tree. So instead of having one main branch for every square of trellis, they'll have this massive dominant cola with the surrounding squares empty. But since they didn't do the one node strategy, they have all these side branches coming through on the sides. So I feel it's a little bit more out of control. You're letting the plant sort of take control a little bit more. So are you going to get more larvae buds? Maybe, I'm not sure. The harvest is going to be probably a little bit harder, because when I do the harvest, it's like every branch is the same branch. Mm-hmm. We're talking about monocrop. Like, I'm really monocrop. Everything is the exact same.
And there's a lot to be said about consistency. So it makes sense to me.
Like consistency is there, man. Everything is the same. It's really, it's really down to SOPs. Like you can really follow SOPs this way, but you can follow SOPs the other way, not topping your plants and just letting it go. Like I said, I'm going to try it because it must be an incredible amount less of labor. But
are you worried though that you're going to have bud to bud contact in that environment? Because if you have 3 colas coming up in a 6x6 square, they're eventually going to get to a point where they're so heavy they're going to lean on each other.
Yeah, but the way that I was talking about is like you have one main cola, all the plant is concentrating its energy there, and on the squares around it, those are just sort of side branches coming through, and I guess you can prune your side branches if there's too many. I don't know. I've never done a grow really like that, but I just see a lot of commercial growers that they seem to have that strategy. But coming back to what I was saying is now that you know how I sort of manage my canopy, if I grow in pots, I can really tell how many main branches my plant has because it's 1 branch per trellis square and I flip with 1 node per branch, right? So let's say in a 7-gallon pot, I think if I exceeded, let's say 6 main branches, I started seeing red stems and deficiencies. Now, let's say that I wanted my plant to come out of that deficiency and keep it in that smaller pot. That is when I would have to water in soluble nutrients, and it would make it without deficiencies. But that's not I like to go water only. So I really had to control my plant size for the pots. That being said, luckily, I've literally never had red stems in beds yet. It's just not an issue.
Yeah, you probably never will either. But yeah. That's a whole different sideshow.
So it comes back to what my sort of problem is that I want to try to fix. It's really a particular deficiency, really targeted, that I've never experienced. And that's why I'm really sort of blaming it on my A Horizon, because it's the variable that I wasn't dealing with beforehand.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So when I was saying that I tried top dressing the compost, I was at around 1,000 ppms before top dressing. I did a whole grow, okay? And then at the end of my grow, I tested the soil again. And you know what those ppms were? They were at 1,500 after the grow.
And that's because you added the compost.
Yes, just from the compost. So it didn't fix my sort of micronutrient deficiency, we'll call it.
Yep.
But I was really surprised to see how the soluble salts actually ended up way higher. Isn't that surprising to you?
No, it's actually not, because you're getting all of that nutrient from the compost itself. Here's a great one. So, been working with ESS at Agroman, doing some food waste extractions to use it as a bioinoculant, biostimulant, fertilizer type additive to their compost to increase the value of what they're actually making. And typical muncher juice comes off the line at, I've seen it as high as, off the charts, like 3,000. Not even blinking, just hard 3,000. And so there is a lot of nutrient in, and that wasn't just food waste. That was green waste. That was horse manure and shavings and hay. And that was lemons. And we've seen this across the board with most of the products that come out of that. And because we generally mix a certain amount of, loosely say greens and browns. Okay, don't because there's a certain amount of food waste, which technically isn't a green or brown. But bottom line is we try to blend the greens and browns
Okay.
to as close as we can, and we typically see anywhere from 1,800, 2,600 up to the highest one I've seen is a solid 3,000.
And sorry, 3,000, is that from the straight compost, or is it
it's from
applying it to a soil?
It's prior to applying it to anything else. So So the muncher takes food waste and these blends of organic waste, grinds it up, suspends it, runs it through basically a digestion system. So it's again grinding it to super small particles, running it through agitation and aeration, then circulation, heat, and controlling pH. So they have 5 parameters that they're basically using mechanically to manage the biology that is doing the super quick decomposition of the matter that's going into it. So again, we're measuring what comes out of it. Basically what goes into it does not have the ppm that it's coming out at, because that's all being released both biologically and chemically from the matter that's going in.
Yeah.
So to see 1,500 post harvest it was probably 1,800 or maybe even 2,000 at the time when you added it. Because
I was really surprised how powerful it was. Yeah.
Well, dude, think about it. You're feeding the plant.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best food in the world as far as like giving the plant exactly what the various levels of chemistry that it wants.
Yeah. A lot of effort is put at our facility into composting. We just realized it's so important, and we do so much pruning. Throwing that plant waste out is just ludicrous to us, right? So every day there's compost labor, basically.
Yep.
We're pruning so much that we have to constantly cool down our compost. So it is labor intensive, but in my opinion, it's well worth it.
Are you cooling it by turning it or adding browns?
Turning it mostly. Okay. I could try to add browns. I do add browns. So let's say that we do a big pruning event. I find that it's just too much to add to my pile. So I add wood chips with it too, to slow down the heating process. But yeah, I got you a little off track there. Do you want to finish what you were saying?
No, that's what this is all about, going all sideways.
But yeah, no, I actually wanted to talk to you about this. If, for example, yesterday I went into work, it was a Sunday, and I went into work to mix the compost because I came in and I must have mixed in too much green, and it went from an under control temperature. Maybe I was at like 100, and I came in Sunday and it was 140. Wow. Oh, shoot. Okay. That's too much. So I mixed it up. Would you say that if it goes to 140, I really screwed up the biology in my whole compost? Or let's not forget that 140 is at the center of the compost, in the middle.
Correct.
So I'm hoping that around it, the biology is thriving, and I'm stirring it, and the biology that I lost in the middle will still come back.
It will.
You say? Yeah. Because you know what? Today is Monday. I came in, it's a holiday today, but obviously I still went into work, and I cooled it down yesterday and it shot back up to 150.
150.
Yeah, that usually doesn't happen. But again, we did a huge pruning, and I should have added more browns.
Have you added any water to it?
No, no.
Yeah,
So today I mixed it again and put a big tote full of wood chips into the pile.
are you, no, you're not still at work. You're home now, right?
Yeah, I'm actually at my parents' right now. It was a family dinner, and I'm upstairs.
All right, so I definitely add some water. Water definitely helps to keep things in balance because
Does
the
it
microbes.
really? Okay. Sorry to cut you off, but I would have assumed that adding water would have just activated the whole thing and made it heat up even more. No?
No, no, it actually
Really?
helps. It
Okay.
actually,
Well,
especially when you're at high temp,
okay.
because at high temp, the organisms are relying on the nitrification process to break down the carbon. So that's why it's getting so fucking hot because they're cooking. They're using that nitrogen, off gassing it. So you're losing your nitrogen value, and you're losing your organisms because they
Yeah.
can't take that high temp. Now, some of them will go into cyst. Some of them will probably crash and burn. But again, that's only in that core. So you're still going to be fine at the end of the day. But
Yeah.
no, I typically like when things get super hot, if I'm going that route, if I'm doing thermophilic compost, I'll add water to cool shit down. And it
Okay.
both physically cools it down, but it also gives them another food source. So they're not so reliant on the thermophytes to
Right.
create that, that release of carbon, which they all want.
Hmm. Generally speaking, I do flip at 115, like you say, but
Yep.
sometimes from one day to another, it just shoots up, and it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we always add plant matter to the compost, always, always. So it doesn't really have a chance to completely cool down, it seems. So before I use the compost, would you say that if the compost has been going for a long time, several months, I'm always adding to it. If I just stop and I let it chill out for a month, is it okay to use?
Well, again, it's as long as your temps are below, I've used it as high as 120. I don't recommend that to people. I usually say you should
Okay.
be at 100 or less when you're using
Okay, well that's good, Leighton, because last time I did this, it cooled down to 90. So okay. So I feel like 90 is for the environment that my compost is in. It's still hot. The garage is maybe 70
it.
max,
Yep.
right? So if a compost
Above
is
ambient.
it's still working,
Yep.
but it's okay to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, you're in the mesophilic range. So that's where you're getting your protozoa production.
Okay, great. So yeah, letting it sit for a month for sure. I can get down to like 90,
Mhm.
and that's a safe zone. Okay,
And
nice.
here's another trick for you. If you're concerned that the compost is immature, and by immature I mean that it's going to steal nitrogen out of whatever you apply it to,
Yeah,
just so that it can continue to compost, right?
yeah.
Typically, I'll throw a handful of grass seed on it and just watch what happens. If the grass seed obviously germinates, that's a great sign.
Yeah.
If it starts to rise up and turn a little red, you're missing something, you're a little deficient. If it goes from red to yellow, then it's immature.
Okay.
Now, like I just did a compost seeding like a couple weeks ago. No, because it's only probably day 10, and typically you'll get a faster germination when it's mature than when it's immature. So this one took about 7 days to germinate.
Yeah.
When it germinated, it came up and there was a red middle to the grass. The top tip was green, but the very base of the stalk was green. But in the middle, there was like a little, reddish color to it.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I was like, okay, obviously I'm not at the point where I'm getting the nutrient cycling that I should be getting, because it should be just a beautiful dark green.
Yeah.
So I just added water and I added a little fish hydrolysate. And the next day I came in and the red was gone, the green was there. And now I've got probably, like, I don't know, almost 2.5, 3 inches of growth on it. And
Okay.
we're still at like day 10. So, again, these are tricks that I've come up with over the years to monitor, again, the dynamic that we don't talk about, which is kind of PPM, which is the nutrient availability, nutrient cycling, soluble salts, all of those things that allow that plant to function normally in this immature or mature environment.
Yeah.
Take a handful of that compost before you add anything into it. Throw it in a solo cup, throw some seeds on top, water it, keep it moist. It's really important to do. You don't want to dry out, because then you're not going to get a good germination rate. And watch what happens to the plants, because you'll know within 7 to 10 days, pretty quick, about whether or not you are in a place where it's going to steal nitrogen or a place where it's going to provide nitrogen.
Nice. Okay. Well, really good tip. So sort of back where I was going with all of this is, I was surprised to see the ppms go up that much after a full grow. I was hoping that, humic acids and whatnot would seep down into that A horizon and help with my issue that I'm dealing with. And it didn't. Another observation too in that lab test I wanted to add was that every grow back to back, my pH came at around 6.6. And in this soil test, the Malic 3 came to 7.1 and the saturated was 6.9. Usually the Malic 3, the standard test, and the saturated always have the same pH value. It's honestly the first time that I saw it different. So again, the standard was 7.1 and the saturated was 6.9. I think I'm still pretty close to being in range. Like, what's your target pH for cannabis? Is it neutral?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, you want to be in that neutral range. 6.8, 7.2. I mean, that's
right. Okay.
and that's
a lot of guys tend to say a little acidic,
and that's fine. Yeah, that's fine, because again, at the end of the day, the microbes are managing the rhizosphere.
Of course,
they're going to be running it low and running it high, depending on what they're trying to solubilize out of the sandstone, clay, and organic matter. So,
but would you be concerned if I kept adding compost and that pH would, I don't know if that pH would keep creeping up, or does
no, it'll actually creep the other way. In the beginning, think about it this way.
Does it need it go up?
Well, I know that's okay. Mm-hmm. At the end of decomposition is organic acid.
Okay.
It's humate. It's humic acid, right? And humic acid has a low pH.
So you think it'll creep back down?
Yes, it'll definitely creep back down. Nice. But we often see that increase in pH as the composting process is going on, especially when you get into high temps. pH always goes up.
Okay.
Until it gets to a certain point where it starts to calm down, temperature goes down, pH goes down with it.
Okay, because when I did a compost test with Logan, so I say compost test, it wasn't a Malic 3 or saturated paste. It was a specific compost test. My pH of my compost came close to 9.
Yep.
I remember sharing that with you. Everything seemed really good. You said that the The biology tested
Andy.
by Andy was great, and all the values from the compost test was good. So yeah, I'm happy that you say, and your explanation makes sense, that it will creep down over time. So let's get even further now. So my big project was to sort of fix my problem with my A Horizon. So I had a lot of sample left of the sand, silt, and clay that I used to create that A Horizon. So I started doing sort of tests on how I could increase the pH. And the thing that I did that worked by far the best was mixing my compost into it. So right after mixing, it went from, let's say, around 5.5 to 6.4. Boom, right away. I have a pH pen for soil. I have a Blue Lab pH pen. So I was obviously really impressed by that. I let it sit for several weeks and it didn't change, right? So that told me that it wasn't going to come back down for some reason or creep back up or anything unexpected. So it really put that sand, silt, and clay close to optimal pH range. So now going back on what I said at first, that you had observed that my sand, silt, and clay had a bit of, the sand was a bit too fine for you. So I had coarse sand. I added coarse sand to the mix to see if that would have an effect on pH, and it didn't. So I told myself, okay, well, that means that I can add coarser sand also. Why not? Another thing that I did was I tried to use my original sand, silt, clay mix and really saturate it with water. And I noticed that it sort of had the effect of compacting a lot. And if I wanted to put my finger through it, it became really hard. And after mixing the compost in it and doing the same thing, it stayed a lot more fluffy and it felt a lot more porous. So anyway, I think that maybe one of the mistakes that I did was not add enough organic matter to my sand, silt, and clay.
So there's a lot to unpack here. So let's start with that. All right. So when you had your sand, silt, and clay, your mix, your A Horizon mix, had you added any organic matter to it at that point, or were you going to add the organic matter?
So my source of sand, silt, and clay had extremely low, next to no organic matter. So what I did, I mixed it 4 parts sand, silt, and clay, so like 4 7-gallon buckets, and then a 7-gallon bucket of my O Horizon.
Okay. And that was so that's what you did during these tests.
No, initially that was my initial batch of A Horizon. That
and you still have that material left? Some of that? Okay. Yeah. So you took that material that had the 20% organic matter.
Yes.
And you added a little bit more organic matter.
So without adding more, I still had some of that A Horizon mixed into it. I just think it wasn't enough.
Yep.
Bottom line. And let's not forget, for example, typical potting mixes, which is my O Horizon, is around 1/3 pumice, right? So that's not organic matter right there. It is aeration. But still, and the other factor too is how fluffy is that 7-gallon bucket of O Horizon. Like if you compact it down, you can double it up easily. So I feel like it's not sort of a perfect method of saying I'm putting in 20% organic matter. Dude, and I just feel
you're spot on, man. You're spot on. This goes back to weight versus volume. And it's a nightmare. It's a friggin' nightmare because, you're trying to create ratios that you can follow, with an SOP, just do this and you're okay. But the reality, the fact is that, you're dealing with a real fluffy potting soil. You can probably pack 4 times the volume in it.
Exactly.
Get on it, right? And another thing is that, like, when you add water, you're adding weight, but you're also compacting it. So now you can get more material in there because you've watered it to the point where it started to compact.
Exactly.
And when you have compaction, you're going to have anaerobic conditions, whether it's moisture or not. Anaerobic conditions are going to drop pH. They're going to push it to the acid. Yeah. So the fact that you put your finger in there and it was hard to penetrate it, it shows you that you're dealing with a compacted soil, and then you fluffed it up with some organic matter, and now you can easily penetrate your finger, and you've stabilized your pH at a better level. And that pH is probably going to stay at that level for quite some period of time, because as that organic matter breaks down, then you're going to start to creep down, but it's going to take a minute. It's going to take a hot minute for that compost to completely break down.
Yeah. So, sorry, are you saying, like, would you say that over time, if I corrected my pH with the compost, it's going to creep back down eventually?
I have to believe in nature it will.
Yeah.
And this is another thing too that we don't talk about is dry downs. Because if you have a dry down event, you're almost decompacting the soil. As crazy as it sounds, when clay dries out, it leaves a hole. So clay expands when it gets wet. And this is on a microscopic level, but on a microscopic level, you got a ton of these platelets. And so, especially if they are properly, or if they are in a biologically rich environment, the clay platelets stack up like we've talked. One is on a flat, one is on the end, those on the flat. So it creates that lattice, that column that the biology colonize around with their biofilm. So it really literally creates a freaking column. So as that column expands and contracts, it's creating more pore space and essentially decompacting what was compacted.
Yeah.
So, you're going to have all these different forces fighting each other, but that's the way nature works. And, that's why, when you have certain weather events, we have not only biological shifts, but we have growth shifts. Either the plant goes into remission or just shuts down and sloughs off roots, or maybe it goes into an explosive growth phase. So
let's say you would go out on the field, treat a big field with compost. That field was too acidic. You fix the pH problem with compost, and you don't add synthetic fertilizers, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you fertilize synthetically, you're always acidifying your field, and you have to compensate with lime. So we're not dealing with this. Let's say you had a big field, whether you're doing corn or whatever you're doing, your soil is too acidic, you treat it with compost, it fixes the pH. Are you good with pH if you farm organically?
Well, you still have, remember that when things compact, you're gonna drop pH no matter what you do. Typical farms are using plowing and synthetics.
Yeah.
And that combination is creating that compaction.
Yeah. So for sure, you have to retreat with lime. You're acidifying your soil.
Right. You have no choice. You have no choice. But when you move into a biological system, in the beginning, you're probably going to have to both amend to get pH to a norm.
Yeah.
And you're going to also have to amend, like nutrients of some kind, whether they're rock dust, whether they're meals of some kind.
Sure. Yeah.
Because you've stripped it of all of the nutrients that it once had. And because it's compacted, the roots, i.e. the rhizosphere itself, can't get into those compacted soils and start mining the material that is on the sand, silt, and clay, because they're all packed together. It can't get into it, can't access it.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, this is that is one of the most common challenges we have in flipping fields. This is where dissolved organic matter, i.e. compost extracts, because compost teas are they're just not as good. Extract is friggin' 10 times better than tea. This is where a really good compost extract comes in invaluable, because it can sink down in there, and it gets a foothold. And then as things start to expand out, it can travel further and deeper down into those compacted zones, and then start to open them up and release that nutrient and allow the roots to actually start penetrating those compacted areas. And again, letting nature do its thing, it's going to decompact it eventually over time.
Okay. I guess my question was, let's say we're talking about a potting mix. My experience with a potting mix is that if I amend in a balanced way over time, somehow my pH always stays the exact same, and I don't have to worry about pH. When we're talking about more an A horizon type, so a sand, silt, clay, organic matter, if I do reach that target pH, will it stay there long term, or is there something I have to do to sort of manage it down there? Is it going to acidify again?
So remember, your nutrients are going to balance the pH. If you're adding CalMag, you're adding anything that has that more alkaline side to it, then that is what's keeping that pH in range.
Yeah, and I was keeping, I can keep the top of my bed in range, but for some reason, it doesn't affect the A horizon. It doesn't, my amending doesn't up that pH. Could it be that I didn't have enough organic matter and it was just compacted?
That would be my guess at this point.
Yeah, and that's my guess too.
And I think a great way to find that out is, if you have a chance between flips, find a little corner somewhere where you're not going to touch anybody's roots, and dig down until you find it. Because what I've found too is that.
Well, I haven't finished my story.
Go ahead.
Way the fuck beyond that.
Go. Tell me more.
So after a lot of testing in pots, feeling the soil, testing the pH, et cetera, I came down to the conclusion that adding about 10% by volume of compost was the way I wanted to go. And when you had observed that you thought my sand wasn't coarse enough, I had asked you a while back, is it, when we're talking about sand silt clay ratio, are you worried about a percentage of sand that is too high? And you told me maybe you'd be more worried about too much clay, too much silt, too much sand. You'd really have to overdo it. Do you agree with my interpretation?
Yep.
So I decided, well, why not add a little bit of coarse sand too? So for my 10% of compost, half of that I added sand. And what I did was my flower room has 4 beds. They're 4 by 45 each. So a 45-foot bed is still a fairly large bed. So I took half of the room after my last grow, okay? And I actually dug out my O horizon pretty extreme, okay? So I did sections of 4 by 4 at a time. Dug out the whole O horizon, put it in totes, and then I took a pitchfork and I really mixed up that A horizon really well, making sure that I wasn't going into the E horizon. When it was all nice and fluffed up, I dumped a 7-gallon bucket, which is about that 10% ratio of organic matter. So a 7-gallon bucket of compost, that sand, and I really thoroughly mixed it into the A Horizon by hand. And I did the whole damn bed. And as I did those sections of 4x4, I dumped the O Horizon on top of it again. Do you think that's crazy?
No, I think that's genius.
I wanted to fix the problem.
Yeah,
I tried a lot of things. It wasn't working. So I went ahead and did it.
And it fixed the problem?
Okay, so now before we talk about that, I think so. Okay, long story short, it's just that I'm just 3 weeks into this first grow since doing. Okay, and the main problem is that seeing that deficiency was cultivar dependent, and I'm growing a cultivar right now that I've never grown in the beds. Okay. That being said, I put a plant in side by side, a cultivar that I know will heavily react.
Yep.
Okay, to this, and side by side, there's a massive difference. Like the one that I treated, the A Horizon, is friggin' glorious, and the one that I didn't treat is a piece of shit.
Really? And yeah. that's the tough cultivar.
Yeah, that's the really tough cultivar. I was like, if I put that side by side, I will know, because I know that cultivar reacts heavily to that. The cultivar that I'm growing right now, though, doesn't really show. If you really look at the whole grow, I'm only looking at the untreated side. There's a couple of spots that I see those symptoms, but in general, I don't see it. What I do see is that the left side of the room that is not treated is, I would say, give or take 6 inches shorter than the other side. Less vigor. It's still really nice plants, really good performing plants, but the side that was treated is just outperforming. It's like honestly incredible.
Yeah, I think you figured it out, was that it was a combination of the coarse sand and the fact that you did not have enough organic matter in it, and the fact that it compacted on you, and that's why the pH dropped. And that's why you couldn't fix it. That's why you couldn't fix it. Right?
I'll still have to follow up with you after the whole grow. Yeah. And is that slight deficiency going to creep up a little bit again?
Are you talking about the little black dots on the leaves?
Yeah. But I'm 3 weeks in, and I see none right now.
I don't think it will creep back in. I don't.
I'd be really surprised, because my new room that I was really, really careful with pH and organic matter and saturating it, putting my fingers through, like I did all that. Like I really thought this through. I did a full grow immaculate. 0 problems, 2 different cultivars.
Yep.
Yeah. So
you're talking about the new room versus the old room.
Exactly. Yeah. So the new room was a totally different A Horizon.
Yep.
Right. Yep. I really took my time to make sure that sand was coarse enough, that it just felt right, manipulating it, saturating it, that the pH was on target, everything. Put in a lot of effort to fix those problems. So anyway, that whole labor that I did to change essentially my A Horizon in my older room, I truly think fixed it. I mean, when you see the canopy side by side, there's no friggin' doubt. Like when you see those at least 6 inches less of growth on the untreated side, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Tom, you got to take pictures so that when we come back on and we check it out, we can actually see it, man.
You know what, man? Like I tried to take pictures, and it's hard to take pictures. I'm not good at it. It's super obvious in person. But if I would have showed you the picture, it's like, okay, is there really a difference?
I have the same problem.
It's not the same, man.
No, pictures pictures are worth 1,000 words, but what our eyes see are probably 1,000,000 words.
Oh yeah, you see a lot more detail in person. You even if you're not a plant person, you can tell like, well, yeah, that side looks better than that one, clearly.
Right?
Even though they kind of both look good, one looks a lot better. One big observation I wanted to share with you though is when I did my test in a pot to see what would happen with pH when I added the organic matter, so the compost. I was mixing it by hand and got the chance to really thoroughly mix it, right? So when I started doing it in my A Horizon, in my beds, I mixed it real good as well as I could with the pitchfork, a little bit by hand. And then I took my Blue Lab meter to test the pH, and the pH hadn't changed. I was like, what the fuck is going on? So I thought, well, the only thing that's different from what I did is I did it by hand and the mixing was really thorough. So I took a sample from that square, put it in a bucket and mixed it for like 5 minutes. Okay. Then I went into the other room and fully recalibrated my soil pH pen, because that's one thing about soil pH pens. I don't know why, but if I take one reading, okay, I feel I can trust that reading. And that's compared to lab tests, okay? But if I take a reading in one soil, I just clean it, and then I take another reading, out of whack. Even like 2 readings back to back in the same soil, I feel I can't trust my second reading. Don't know why that is. Do you have any idea? Do you deal with soil pH pens?
The only thing I can think is biofilm.
I don't know. Like I said, I clean it and I have to calibrate it every time, man.
I would just calibrate it every time because again, these instruments are temperamental, and just a tiny fraction of biofilm could be enough to fuck you up.
Yeah. So anyway, just to tell you how really thorough I was with this, I recalibrated the whole thing, and I tested in my bucket when I really went with a thorough hand mix. And like I said, when I just did it really well with the shovel, I had no change in pH. 3 guys were with me and they saw it too. I was like, I put the probe in, boom, 6.4 instead of 5.2. I was like, holy fuck. So it's super important to really mix it in well.
Yep.
So then we took the time, man, 3 guys on a 4x4 and just mix in our hands like that. Mix for, I don't know, in a 4x4, maybe a good 15 minutes, 3 guys. And then you stick the pH pen in and boom, it's what you want. So
I think that's basically getting the enzymes to release. So the enzymes would be on specifically the organic matter, which has the much higher pH, and getting the ions on the sand, silt, and clay to take those enzymes and absorb them into it. So therefore, i.e., giving a better exchange of the actual physical material to move that pH needle. So I think you figured out a really good way to deal with that issue, and I'm excited to see what happens after this run, and have that both observation as well as the actual unit measurements to what's going on. Because I think that again it was. I mean, we were fighting this for a year trying to figure this out.
Yeah,
I think you nailed it on the head. I think it was just a matter of not having enough coarse organic matter and coarse sand to help offset the fact that compacted and we lost the pH value that it should have been at.
Yeah, for a year, I tried to take shortcuts. Tried many shortcuts, and then I realized, well, it's gonna have to be the real labor.
Yep.
But it wasn't that bad. I mean, it was the first time for me doing this, so it was a little slower. It took like a day and a half to do 2 beds.
Yep.
So not that bad. And
no, that's not bad.
I really wanted to do the 2 beds instead of the 4.
Yep.
Just to really see the side by side, just to make sure I had fixed it. And if it was a really serious problem, I would have just went all in because I got nothing to lose. But it's, again, like I've been running this for almost 2 years and it's still fine. So yeah, I just corrected that imperfection.
So that one room where you corrected the imperfection before you did the adjustment or the correction, that one was the room you had the best yield you've ever had in?
Yeah, the grow before. But still, it showed that deficiency or whatever you want to call it. But again, the deficiency didn't show in the stalks. It didn't show in the bud. It didn't show in the leaves coming out of the buds. It just showed in the older, bigger fan leaves.
You know, I wonder if it was like a virus that was exposing itself. I mean, because we don't know. It was not an insect. Clearly, wasn't a fungal attack.
No.
Wasn't a nutrient deficiency. So
well, it could have been, right? It couldn't.
Well, I don't know. Without getting that leaf tested,
yeah,
we could have.
I tested the leaves. I don't know how to interpret that. Like, honestly, I took some of the most obviously affected leaves, and they showed like sort of over the amounts that were sort of recommended by the lab for a lot of the nutrients. So maybe they were uptaking too much of something. I don't know. Probably not. But
well, if they're showing too much, then yeah, they obviously could have had an imbalance that set off a virus that reacted to the abundance of nutrient. You know, another thing too is, did you use New Age?
What's New Age?
New Age Lab for the sap test or the leaf test?
No, I'm not even sure that I could do that. Like, can you send cannabis material over the border?
Canada and goddamn US. It's ridiculous. Fucking neighbors, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
Well, whoever did your
kind of illegal in your country, remember?
Yeah, don't get me started. Fucking NAFTA. Anyway, whoever did your leaf test, and we're going to assume that it's going to show up again in the 2 untreated beds, correct?
It started weirdly showing up right at the end of the bed. Okay. Like really bad. I can't explain to you why. It's just that little section at the end of the bed that started showing.
When was that? That was last harvest.
No, like right now. 3
weeks.
So
you have some plant material that's showing it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All right. And you have some plant material that's not showing it.
Yeah, like the treated side not showing it at all.
All right, perfect.
The untreated side is shorter.
Yep.
Not showing it except at the ends of the bed for some reason. I don't know why, but yeah, it is showing it. So and the side-by-side plant that it's a cultivar that reacted really bad to it
is not showing.
Yeah. Another really interesting variable in all of this is to get through in the last 2 years that I've been dealing with this, is I've had to be really, really careful with light intensity because I really notice that this problem gets a lot worse the more light the plant gets. And you can obviously notice this. For example, if there's a big fan leaf covering a main branch, that main branch that is covered has 0 symptoms. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So the light drives the nutrient uptake.
Exactly. Again, right? Why I think it's more of a nutrient thing than a virus thing, but obviously maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, who knows, dude? But let's take a sample of the bed at the end of the bed that's affected, and then a leaf tissue sample of the one that's not affected. Don't take the middle of the one that's affected. Take the one that's completely not affected, the new side. Okay. Send those out, and let's look at the test results.
So I'm going to take one that's affected.
Yes.
Then the non-affected. Sorry, am I going with the treated side?
Yes, the treated side.
Yeah. Okay, I'm doing that tomorrow, 100%. I'd be crazy not to do it.
No, you have a great opportunity to learn what the fuck that is.
Yeah.
Right? Because look, if another thing we could do too, well, you're in Canada. I was going to say we could cut it open and do an extract to see if there is anything like a bacterium that's living in it that's causing that dark spot. Like it's not a bubble, right? It's just it's not raised up or sunk in.
Yeah, no, like I've seen that on leaves in general in other plants. Like for example, I do big pheno hunts there, and I do it with small plants and small plots, and I've seen stuff like that, little imperfections like that in leaves. I mean,
but it's not raised up and it's not recessed, correct? Is it flush? Can you feel it when you rub your finger over the spot?
No, you don't feel it. No, you don't feel it. It's not a bump or anything like that. No.
I gotta shut the screen before I get blinded.
Like I see what you mean. Like it could be interpreted like do you know what gull mites are?
Well, it's intercellular, right? It's something that's affecting the chlorophyll in the plant cell because it's not green, right? Yeah. So like again, a virus would kill part of the cell, which would show as an expression like something like that, where it's not raised up, it's not recessed, it's still flushed to the material around it, but just inside those cells there has been an expression made. Some of the oreganellos died, maybe the chloroplast died, who knows what.
So how would I test that? Like
I gotta think about that. I mean, the only person I know that could test for that is Dr. James White. But again, he's in the U.S. We can't get him leaf tissue.
I'll call the University of Guelph in Ontario. Do you know that university?
No. Do they have a department that studies endophytes?
I'll check. Like to me, that's the most legit lab I've dealt with so far. They're really thorough in their explanations.
You know what?
Everything and
who might else be able to help is Av. Like reach out to Av and say, hey, do you know any endophyte specialists that are on the same level as Dr. James White out of Rutgers? And he very well may have a resource for us to send that to. And not that it matters, but it's just curiosity is killing me.
Exactly. Yeah. But do you think that adding the compost and sand would have killed that virus?
Well, all right. Again, we definitely know it has higher nutrients. It definitely know that it's affected by light.
Yeah.
And so the plant is having a expression, right? A cellular expression. Will the compost and the sand help that? Very well may, because the pH was also a driving factor. So we had pH, we had light, and we had what was the other thing? I just said it. I'm getting fucking tired. I'm getting old. Three factors that were affecting the tissue, like the nutrients that moved into it, the pH, and so those are the two main drivers that affected light and pH, affected the nutrients driven from up that plant to that leaf that showed the expression. So those are your three things that are affecting it. And again, the only person that would have the wherewithal or the instruments to kind of determine this would have to be an endophytic specialist. You know, it could, dude, it could have hatched an endophyte inside the cell. Like, so I just did another one with James. Dude, I love that guy. And we were talking about some crazy ass shit about, you know, expressions like, and the fact that there are actually protozoa that are also endophytic. So imagine if you tipped off or excited a protozoa to start consuming the endophytes with inside of a plant cell, what would happen to that plant cell? Well, the plant cell would obviously express some condition, whether it's like a spot where it died, or maybe it got clouded up with the excrement with the excretion from the protozoa eating the bacterium inside the plant cell. So it made it into a compost extract that closed off the cell so you can't see the chloroplast anymore. There could be a lot of crazy shit going on.
Yeah, who knows? But back to what I was saying too about light intensity was I've been really careful in the last 2 years of really ramping up my light intensity gradually through flower. And it really sort of, it assures me that it's not going to get too bad if I do that. But the downside of that is I always felt that I haven't been driving my plants as hard as I could have been because I'm so careful with that light intensity. And this grow, I'm just cranking the lights.
Can't hurt, right? And this is in the new room.
It's it's in the old room. The new room has no problems. My first grow, I completed it, cranked the lights hard, no problems. Yeah.
Well, this is all kind of dovetailing back together, that the light intensity drove the reaction or the chemistry that the plant uptook that drove the cellular interface between the endophytes and the actual plant cell to show a reaction of some kind. So this,
like in my mind, just simplifying it, I thought that the more light intensity, the more the plant would want to pull nutrients. And if there is some nutrient imbalance, either created by pH, anaerobic conditions, whatever the case may be, it would amplify that problem. The harder you drive it with more light. Because if I compare myself to my friends that grow, say, in Rockwool, and they can just force feed those plants with ungodly amounts of EC, they can drive their light intensity a lot more than I could in organics, right? So am I wrong saying that the more I drove my plants hard with more light, it showed those nutrient deficiencies caused by whatever problem I was having?
It has to be, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, the sheer fact that one leaf laying over the other expressed it and the other one didn't.
Yeah. And I'm trying to just find other hypothesis that it's not a virus, because you're really freaking me out.
dude, again, look, there are viruses in everything. Viruses are our friends.
Yeah.
They literally drove evolution. Without them, we would be probably a monospecies on this planet. Literally, just one thing that lives here, right? Well, that's kind of what we're doing now, but that's a whole different story. Unfortunately, I think we're the virus that's killing off everything else. But
pretty much,
we won't go there. But bottom line is that, no, just because it shows an expression, as long as it doesn't affect yield or anything else, it doesn't really matter, although it is a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Because if you can press or force the plant to express more of the things that you want, whether the terpenes, cannabinoids, or just overall density or weight, then that's the goal. At the end of the day, you're here as a business to make money and make the best product you possibly can to create customer demand. So no, it's better to learn these things, and then now we've got more knowledge to maybe solve another mystery that comes up, or figure out another way to avoid that kind of condition. Because let's face it, if you're creating a negative condition that's causing a cellular reaction, that's probably not a good thing. Like, you could express other things accidentally, right? And maybe it's only in this genetic, but maybe there's another genetic that's going to come in that's going to have a different issue, and maybe it will affect the yields or the terps or the cannabis.
Exactly. And so, when I dug out that O Horizon and I got to the A Horizon, it did seem really compacted and too hard.
Yeah,
like when we saw that, we were like, okay, adding organic matter is the logical thing to do here for sure, man.
Yeah.
The thing though that I was kind of surprised was digging into that A Horizon that felt compacted was full of roots from the previous grow. So it's not like the roots hit that thing and we're like, oh, we're not going in there. They were still growing into it,
which is good. That's good. That's what it's supposed to do. But the fact that they couldn't grow in as deep or as fast as they probably could have if it was
probably fun. And maybe that's why I'm seeing that increase growth on the treated side this time around.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
It's really obvious that the plants are thriving better. One thing I find weird though is, wouldn't you think that with such a thick O Horizon that, let's say, has no problems, I would say it doesn't have any problems, everything's in balance, wouldn't you say that if there's a problem with the A Horizon, the plant could still have access to whatever it wants from the O?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Well, no.
So why?
Because at the end of the day, in just the O, it can't get everything it wants. It wants the minerals. It wants to pull apart the clay. It wants bacteria on the clay, the silt, and the sand, releasing nutrients. It wants the clay to hold those nutrients. So say it wants a calcium, and it goes down there, it pulls the calcium, it spits out a potassium, or allows that exchange pool to shift.
Well, I fully agree with you. Go on.
Well, I guess that's the important thing. And more importantly is that with proper gas exchange, you're going to prevent compaction. So again, the water's not going to compact it as easily, and the roots are going to have the ability to move easier, and also draw in more pore space, as well as like allowing that gas exchange, CO2 out, oxygen in, which is further going to prevent the anaerobic, or the potential to go anaerobic or low pH.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you in that those are all really good reasons why I did the Horizonal system. We all know the benefits of having that sand, silt, clay, organic matter. But that being said, it is totally possible to just grow a cannabis plant indoor in just a potting mix and not having those symptoms that I'm seeing in my bed. So I just find it kind of curious that if there is a problem in that A Horizon, why can't the plant just stay in the O and take whatever it wants? And I was thinking maybe one of the reasons why is it does grow into that Horizon, and maybe since the pH was off for whatever reason, maybe it's not even a deficiency. Maybe it was like getting burned by uptaking too much of certain micronutrients because they were overly available in an acidic situation. Is that a
damn? That's
yeah. Okay, I thought of I've thought of that a lot. So
Yeah,
you think that might be an
absolutely,
option?
absolutely valid, because remember, the plants, everything is lazy in nature except for humans, right? All the plants, water, everything just wants to do its thing. It doesn't want to be forced. It wants to be able to travel and move about and do its thing. So the plant's no different. But if the plant is being lazy and it can't get access to this nutrient, but it can get access to this, it will uptake more than it needs,
Right.
because it's being lazy, man. It's a free food. I'm going to take it. I shouldn't eat that donut, but I'm going to eat that donut anyway because I have access to it.
Yeah. So that's kind of always what I thought. Maybe it's not a deficiency. Maybe certain things are
Clearly
overly available, because if it was a deficiency, why can't it just take it up from the O?
Right. And again, it's not a deficiency in my mind. It's an expression. If it was a deficiency, it would have been a bubble or a recession, or you would have had a loss of crop or a cutback on yield.
You would see it in the stems, I feel. Most deficiencies.
Yeah, will show up in the stem because that's where it's moving all the liquids.
Yeah.
It's moving all the nutrients around.
And my stems, no matter the cultivar, are perfectly lush green.
So again, it was a cellular expression.
Yeah.
But interesting nonetheless. Very cool. And I can't wait to get the test results back. So
I'm sending it tomorrow for sure.
Sweet.
I'll share it with you. Yeah. Another problem I've been having, actually, talking about problems, is I don't know if you have suggestions for this. I've been having problems with bottomless pots. And I think it's probably my fault, something I'm doing, but I'm getting like the worst transplant shock, which I obviously shouldn't be getting. And I find that it takes a while for the plant to go from that bottomless pot and into the bed. And before it really gets into the bed, I think it gets pot bound and it gets deficient. Obviously, it's probably that my pot is too small. Like, have you tried that bottomless pot tech? Have you had clients have the same thing?
So remember, like, I don't know who the manufacturer is, and if you've switched manufacturers or you've always used the same ones. Perhaps they've switched ingredients. There are all kinds of variables that are present nowadays that were a lot less present during COVID, as far as like supply chains, availabilities to components to make things. So there could have been a mix-up in the supply chain. If you're using the same product, if you're using a different product, well, maybe there's a different manufacturing procedure. But
I'm just using 4x4 plastic pots, 4.5 by 4.5. It's kind of a standard square pot. And I took scissors and cut the bottom out of each one.
Okay. And then when you cut down you don't remove the pot until the end, right? Or do you cut down the side and open it up?
Like all the bottoms are cut off.
I know the bottoms are gone, but I'm talking about like the sides, so you can unwrap it. You just leave the pot there.
No, I just put the pot on the bed,
and it stays there till harvest.
Yeah, totally. So the labor of the transplant is incredibly quicker and easier, and that's why I can't go back. So I kind of have to figure this out.
Maybe I totally understand it.
Maybe it's vegging less, something like that. Yeah.
Or are you using something different as far as like your compost?
No, it's really like I feel like it takes too long for the plant to get from the bottom and into the bed. So there's a transition period where the plant is in that perfect environment to go on overdrive, stuck in that little pot.
Well, so here's the experiment. Cut down both sides of it, open it up, and look and see if it's root bound. If it's not root bound, then just put the pot back on, put a little piece of duct tape on it, and leave it alone.
Well, I've tried it. Like I've tried planting straight in the beds, not bottomless pots, and I don't get that reaction. So it is something to do with the bottomless pot technique. And it always does this. Like it goes from coming out of the veg room perfectly fine, then it goes deficient, and then it connects to the bed and it comes out of the deficiency and it's perfect again. But that period of deficiency, like, fucks up my veg for like a week. Like I could flip my plants a week earlier.
So come out of veg earlier and add humic acid.
Yeah.
Because humic acid and kelp, if you have it, because kelp's a plant hormone.
I'm scared of kelp for arsenic.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I hear you. But you know, and another thing too, maybe is JDOM microbial solution might give you a similar plant reaction as far as hormonally.
Yeah.
So again, the three things to look at when you're rescuing anything. You want hormones in whatever form you can get. You want humic acid to make chemistry play nice, and a good biological bath if possible. Yeah. So the biology can help transition the chemistry as well as the enzymatic or hormonal responses.
Yeah. I love the technique because labor-wise, it's crazy. And digging all those holes for a transplant is like, you're not no-till anymore. You're kind of tilling every time there.
Right. And you don't want to do that.
Yeah. I see Steve Cantwell do it, and his bottomless pots are obviously way bigger. But for me, it's not realistic to have a pot that big in my veg room. I just have to reduce my plant count so much.
Gotcha.
So anyway,
all right. So here's your answer. Pull it out of veg a little bit earlier.
If that's my main plan.
And if you do that, either way, you're going to win.
Yeah.
Because you pulled it out of veg a little earlier, so you don't have to worry about the recovery.
Exactly.
And then hit it with those, do a side by side and hit it with the some kind of hormonal and some kind of humic acid. And you can make the humic acid with your compost too.
Of course. Yeah.
Just stir the fucking shit up. Make chocolate milk with it.
Yeah. I saw an Elaine Ingham video long time ago explaining, like, if you're buying humic acids, you're wasting your money, and she was just explaining exactly that.
But you have to have good compost. That's the other thing.
Which I do.
Right, you have fantastic compost, but not all people do. So I usually recommend, buy BioAg, because I know they have a really good full humic product
for sure.
Safe. And so, but I don't know how people's compost, how safe people's compost. Yeah. And again, it's not safe; it's maturity. It has to be very mature in order for you to press a good volume of humic acid out of it.
Yeah. Hey, talking about watering in stuff, I wanted to discuss this with you. My new room that I built, those horizontal beds, like I said, I did a full run. And as usual, this run was the first time that I was growing this particular cultivar. So my O Horizon started a little too heavily amended, I would say. So my ppms were around 1400. Okay. And that's because I purchased my O Horizon pre-mixed, from a trusted company. The main reason why, I'll tell you why I purchased it, was because for me to source the organic matter only, and unfortunately, I'm sorry, but it's a lot peat moss. I know you hate peat moss.
It's all right. It's all good.
It just works. So that's what I went with. But to source peat moss on its own, and then to source pumice on its own, and to mix it together, it was a lot better to just buy it straight from them. So Anyway, I have a really good relationship with them. I fully trust their sources of all their amendments. I'm really involved with them. So anyway, that being said, I feel like they over amended their super soil a little bit, and the ppms were around 1400, like I said. Okay, I grow this cultivar and I test the soil after the grow, and I've never seen a cultivar suck up so many nutrients. It's like it depleted the whole bed of everything.
Wow.
Okay. It was over 1400 ppms of soluble salts, just to give you one idea of one parameter, down to 470 in one grow.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's a nutrient pig, dude.
Like, it almost ate all the sodium, which is awesome.
Right, that's good.
Because it was too high in sodium, it took it almost all up. Anyway, I've never seen anything like it. So I called my buddies that grow in salts, and they grow this particular cultivar. And I asked them, like, am I crazy, or is this like a heavy feeder? And they said, we've never seen anything like it. Like, we have to give it endless EC. Like, it'll take everything that we give it. So, do you have any clients that have sort of not really this issue, but cultivars like this that eat an incredible amount of nutrients, that water in soluble nutrients in beds? That's something I've never done.
So, I mean, if I were you, and I'm being forced to grow this cultivar for business reasons, I would just amend as you go. So you always have a rotation. Yeah, just constantly amend, dry amendments, and of course, give them a little compost extract, because you want to loosen those dry amendments up, make them bioavailable, and store them in the biology.
And that's what I was thinking of doing, for sure.
Yeah. And that way you don't crash at the end.
I wonder if it was like a soluble, like a bottle. Like, I know this is blasphemy there, but if I would feed it a little bottle with such an extreme cultivar, maybe that would help me get the absolute max potential out of it.
Well, the only thing I would recommend you do is always add in a compost extract after. And the reason why is you're going to lose biology, but as long as you give it the bottle, give it a couple of days to calm down, and then put an extract on top of it, and don't stress out about it.
I'm not talking about like a bottle, like obviously like synthetics here.
Yeah, well,
like,
again,
would you say that an organic line would?
But even the organic lines have certain synthetic inputs. They have to. There's no other way. Otherwise, they'll never become bioavailable, or worse yet, to precipitate out of solution, and then they're locked up, and you're not going to get the benefit from it.
So if it's sort of certified organic, like in those certifications, there's an allowance for a certain amount of synthetics.
Yes.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
the catch. Huh?
But yeah, it is what it is, dude. It is what it is. As long as you follow with biology, you'll be okay. And again, if you want to bump a little bit with the organic, also do some dry in there too. And that way you're constantly building that pool back up as it's stripping it down. And God forbid you give it some of this bottle, and that's not enough. It wants more, right?
I've never really considered doing this in beds, but I've never really been faced with such an extreme cultivar. And the grow went really well, but I can't help think like, whoa, if it wants to eat such amounts of nutrients, like maybe I could even make it perform better.
Yeah. There's no reason why not. I mean, was it a heavy yielder?
Yes. Well, typically no, but in the beds, like it just did something like incredible. I had ran it once in pots, and it was horrible. My worst grow in my life, but somehow it sold really well. And if you want to call him my boss, like the guy that I contract grow for was like, grow that again. And I was like, okay, I'll try. And in the beds, it exploded. like, honestly, I've never seen anything like it. It changed into another beast.
Nice.
So now I'm like, whoa, I could even drive this thing more if it wants to eat that much more, but I'm really reluctant to
Hey,
water.
just go low and slow, dude.
Yeah.
Just a little bit at a time. Watch what happens. Don't do everything. Just do a small corner.
Yeah. And another question I had for you that you might know this is, when you buy those organic bottle nutrients, how does it stay not nasty? Like, do they put preservatives in there and shit like that I don't want in my beds?
Of course they do.
Okay. So
whether it's a pH suspension,
yeah,
in the form of an organic acid, or if it's an alkaline suspension, there's
I feel like it's going to hurt the spirituality of my bed.
I'm into that, bro. That's why I suggested just dry amendments and compost extracts. But if you want to experiment, fucking experiment. Just do a little one plant. You're not going to kill the whole bed. Have
you tried the line Nature's Nectar?
I've heard a lot about it. I've heard good things about it. But again, at the end of the day, there's what's called proprietary information, which doesn't give you all of the ingredients because they can't.
That's the problem. Yeah.
So it's like fracking, dude. They can kill the earth and tell you nothing.
Yeah. It's like I'm familiar with Nature's Nectar because it's sort of a secret weapon, if you want to call it that. Like, let's say I have to hold on to like 50 tiny plants in tiny pots that are going to become mother plants, but I have to hold on to them for a month. Okay. For space issues, I have to keep them really small. If they're going deficient and I feed in Nature's Nectar, I keep them healthy for that month.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I use it for. And I thought, well, what if I threw that on the beds? But yeah, if I throw in whatever they use, preservatives or whatnot, even if it's just spiritually hurting my beds, like, I don't really feel.
Hey, trust your instincts. Just trust your instincts, Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And talk about spirituality. The conversation James White and I had the last time about the specific job where the only reason we are not seeing catastrophic loss is because of the incredible volume of endophytic and not only volume, but diversity of endophytic bacteria and biology inside of that plant. So again, there's always that thing that you want to keep in the back of your mind, is that you want to give this plant the best genetic potential it can have and give it the most amount of diversity to associate with endophytically wise that it can possibly have, so that it doesn't stress and it stresses more to the point where you're producing more, because again, those are double-edged swords. We don't know where the lines are on that, but
and me wanting to add bottles for that particular cultivar kind of comes down to greed. Let's be honest. Like, I'm like, whoa, if it can take more, like, I can yield more, maybe.
If you want to experiment, it's always good to experiment.
Yeah.
It's always good to experiment. We do have a bunch of questions, and we did go way over our hour and a half line. Sorry about that, Ken.
Oh, hey, you guys have been actually. Lily came downstairs and said, "Are you going to get to the questions yet?"
Oh, man, let's do it. Yeah, 100%.
Oh, fuck, we pissed off Lil.
Oh, I know. I'm in trouble now. I'm telling you. Actually, Lily wanted to point two things out to Tom.
Yeah, take a screenshot, Tom, or Ken, send that information to him. This is fantastic. And if you connect with him, tell him we want to talk to him too.
So who's this guy?
He's an endophytic specialist.
Okay.
Next one.
Take a picture of it.
And then there was that one as well.
This is where I believe he's located.
Cool.
Now, Lily had a question. She wanted to know if your compost was indoors or outdoors. And I think you said it's in your garage, right?
Yeah. It's a year-round thing, so I keep it in the garage. Yeah.
Okay. Then for going back to you're putting your pots on top, Super Nessa one that was thinking maybe it's the temperature difference between your bed and your veg area.
My bedroom and my flower room are very close to the same temperature. Yeah.
Have you heat gunned the soil just to see maybe that your lights are more intense in the beds? Which could,
I haven't for a while, but it's pretty cool compared to the room temp for sure. I
okay.
have checked it. Yeah.
Okay.
Matter of fact, under LEDs, it's incredible how like
Stable?
leaf temp is low compared to room temp. It's crazy. I can push room temp so high and the plants are fine. It's incredible. And you check leaf temp and they're a lot cooler.
Well, it might be interesting just to shoot the soil again and see if there's a difference between the bottom of the bottomless pot soil and the top of the bed soil.
Hey, I'm
You
gonna
never
check
know.
it out for sure. Yeah, for sure.
never-
You never know.
No, difference in moisture. There's so many variables, but yeah, you're
Well,
having a
moisture is a
problem
big thing because since it's stuck in that little pot for a while before it connects to the bed, I have to water the little pot a whole lot.
So your bottom is probably anaerobic and your top's probably hydrophobic. That could be another factor.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it
Yeah, the
dries
difference
out
in
really
watering, top watering to bottom watering, there's a difference, a huge difference there. Is it getting enough moisture coming up when it's touching that soil, or is there a
Hey.
space there?
Why don't you throw a ½ inch of A horizon on the bottom of those little bottomless pots when you're growing them, so that now it'll be a quicker transition into, or it'll be able to suck the moisture up or distribute the moisture equally in the little pot.
Yep. Yeah, I'll try that.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Now, some guys, Mad Dog especially, was saying that for the marks on your leaf, he's thinking it's your LED lights. You're driving too much, but you're saying it's only on certain plants in the next grow that it's happening. Same light,
Yeah,
same.
and I have an R&D room, and I've tried driving the light hard on those cultivars in the R&D room in pots, and it doesn't do it.
It's
just
only
in the beds.
Yeah, it's
right?
only in the horizontal.
Yeah.
Definitely not a light issue because you follow DLI, Daily Light Integral, do you not?
Oh yeah, DLI and like PPFDs, and I'm well on top of that there. And I mean, again, the new Horizonal beds that I have do not do that at all. So it's not like a Horizonal thing. It's something I fucked up in the first A Horizon that I built.
PhD champion is a woman.
Oh, and Lily wants to say that the PhD is actually a woman, not a man.
Okay.
Well, okay.
That's with a name like Champa. How the f are we supposed to know?
Well, yeah, exactly, right? Okay, so
you just assumed.
exactly. The next question: do you feel that the Horizonal soil system has any effect on the microbes farming quorums and an overall ecosystem?
Well, that's the whole goal, is it's to mimic an ecosystem so that these kinds of expressions can happen. Because if you don't have the ingredients or the physical components, you can never get the full expression of the plant or the environment, like the biology.
And it's all about the biology. You can't reach genetic potential without it. And that's what you and James were talking about on the last show with him, was how the changes are happening inside of those cells.
Yep. Crazy shit, man.
So Casper wanted to know any thoughts about adding small percentages of sand, silt, or clay to try and keep your compost from running super hot.
You know, that's a great question, Casper. I in the last run I did, which is a compost that I ran, oh God, it's got to be 8 months ago now. I did. I took a certain amount of clay and I threw it into the pile thinking that it would help the mineralization process. And oh my God, what a difference it made. I made a post on Instagram with a picture of it. You can see the fucking crystals on the compost.
I saw that. Yeah.
That's from the clay. And when I'm
Cool.
actually mining and sieving that material, I'll get these little clay balls that are pink, blue, yellow. I mean, they're like little rainbows. So it's definitely changed my mind as to, like, I know people that put a lot of rock dust and other stuff. So yeah, silica sand would be beneficial a little bit. But clay really had a very big input or impact on what I want to call nutrient levels or mineral associated organic matter.
How did you mix it in? Was it
So
dry and you could sprinkle it in?
Well, where I'm working right now at Peach Hill Soils, they have what they call not bedding. It's just a mix of, it's a high clay mix that they like bulldoze in, and then they build compost on top of it. So it was around, like, when I build my compost piles, the moisture from the compost gets down into it and softens it up, and I could like scoop it up with a skid steer or even with a shovel, where you can't do that when it's dry.
Yeah.
But it's only where I make the compost piles that I have access to it. So I made a compost pile. I had access to a bunch of it. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. So I took that and I sieved it on an 1/8-inch screen. So I fluffed it up, and then I just threw a bunch of it in the compost as I was making it. But they all came together in these little friggin' balls. You know, you talk about birds of a feather flock together. Well, we know paramagnetically the same thing happens, but I never expected to see, you know, and some of the balls are actually pretty freaking big, like not quite a tennis ball. And then the vast majority of them are like marble size. So really interesting, you know, biogeochemical phenomenon that occurred when you add clay to your compost.
Super cool.
And the ding, guys, is Leighton getting messages on his phone. I know we got to teach him to turn it down.
I usually have it off, but I have too much going on today.
Leighton does what he wants.
Yeah. But we're almost done now, so I'll shut it off for the last minute.
Mad Dog wanted to suggest that you run it under HPS lights to see if there's any difference, but I don't believe that.
It's a 50 light room. I'm not swapping 50 lights.
Well, a lot of people really don't understand LEDs and the different light waves that are coming off the LEDs that you're never going to get with an HPS or a metal halide.
No.
The LED is so much better for our plants than anything that's been out there before.
So we're going to have a show coming up real soon here, and we're going to talk a lot about light, not growing with light, but like cellular regeneration on the human side of light. You guys have heard me talking a lot the last 6 months about sun gazing, and I've said how I feel like I get benefit from it. I can't quite explain what that benefit is, but it's like plugging in and getting your battery recharged. And that's just by staring at the sun until you see the blue dot in the middle. You'll see the white and the orange around it, but you'll see a blue center core. And it takes a minute. You got to get used to it. And it definitely don't do it in the middle of the day. It has to be early morning or late afternoon when it's just about to set. But the difference is amazing. And I'll bet this directly correlates with what plants are getting out of the sun as well. And so that's going to be a fun show. That's coming up, I think, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But just stay tuned.
I feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions about light spectrum and the effects on plants. And it's because at the same time, Ken, I don't want to contradict you because I think you're right, but like there are a lot of wavelengths that you're not getting with LEDs that you are with HPS, right? Like a lot of wavelengths that are outside of the power range that aren't considered photosynthetically active. And what do they have to effects do they really have on the plants? No one seems to really know. But for some reason, you can have extreme phenotypic differences between HBS and LEDs. And sometimes, in my opinion, some genotypes are going to express better phenotypes under HBS for some reason. That's my opinion.
That goes back to like Wolf and his discussions on these, what are they called? Sulfur bulbs that actually make
sulfide. All about plasma, right?
Well, no, he's got some crazy.
You should invite him on the show and invite me in the background.
Was that when he was talking about the lights they use in the testing facilities, which are using liquid crystal instead of what we're using now?
It's something fucking bizarre, and I will.
Every time I hear him talking about the next level of technology, because I follow him a little bit, he talks about like this technology of plasma lighting, right?
Yeah. It's like sulfur based or something else that's not like you would not typically associate, but the plasma is part of it. It's part of the delivery.
The bottom line is when you're going to run a cultivar, you really have to run it under the light that you're going to run it in your grow room, because there can be wildly different expressions on different spectrums.
Well, and just like there's wildly different expressions running it between a pot, a bed, the horizontal soil systems, and in ground, it's all. Anything can change everything. It's Mother Nature is wild, man.
Oh yeah, big time.
Hey, remember there was Kevin Jodry told me a story about a guy. I think it was Silver Surfer. So he had a mother plant of Silver Surfer, and he gave each one of his 4 buddies a cut. And the goal was to see who could grow that mother the best. And what they found was it was way different, more so based on terroir and Appalachia first, but then the terroir, the individual's influence. You couldn't tell which was the original. They were all so radically different. So that just goes to show you that these little tiny changes or things can affect that genetic expression radically. So anyway,
it's a big part of my passion for growing like all these different elements. Like we're never going to fully understand this plant. Like you change a little something and everything's completely different. And it's hard to really come up with true scientific conclusions. Like there's so many variables. It's endless.
Well, sea level to on top of a mountain. Yeah, like Kevin's got one strain that he grows up on his property on the mountain that the wind load there is so extreme. It is fantastic there. Anywhere else, it's garbage.
Yeah, I've heard him talk about that actually. Yeah.
Well, right, guys, we're over the 2 hours.
Yep, and if you didn't notice, Poe came up and started licking me because that's me. Where the fuck are you? It's time, Dad. Let's go.
Hey, you used to do 3 hours, Leighton. We're only doing 2.
Yeah, we did that at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So it destroyed my day, but anyway, not their lifestyle.
Okay, guys. So next week with Leighton, we have Tim Hammond. Next week. So there's another fantastic show. Andy and I are doing a show on Wednesday, and we'll see what happens on Friday. I'm still trying to find somebody for Conversations in Kent's Cafe. But other than that, Tom, thank you so much, brother. Your experience, your dedication to finding out the answers absolutely is amazing, brother. Really appreciate you.
My
Agreed.
pleasure. I hope you keep having me on once in a while.
Oh, we will.
We
for
will.
Sure. And Ken, as always, thank you for all the behind the scenes work that you do to make this happen and keep us on track. Thank you.
And as I said before, guys, until the website is fixed for Leighton's compost chorus, and that could be a little while. We're not going to be running the giveaways, but as soon as that's back up and running, we'll be running the giveaways again.
All right. Peace out, everybody.
Peace, guys.